right in.
Yeah, we can. We can roll right in. I'm recording now, so still love
All
your
right.
icon, by the way. It's great.
I do like that. I
Yeah,
do like it
yeah,
a lot.
yeah.
All right, here we go. How you doing, everybody? This is Dennis Michelson. Welcome to the Science of Fantasy Football. Why the Science of Fantasy Football? You get a meteorologist and a biologist together, and they're going to use the scientific method that is guaranteed to make you a smarter fantasy football player. How can I give guarantees in fantasy football when we can't even keep a player healthy from one week to the next?
Yeah.
Well, when I say I guarantee more success, it's because the scientific method just means you're going to use statistics in a smarter way. And statistics drive fantasy football production, no matter what you're looking at. And so if you use the statistics to guide you to an answer, you are going to be a smarter fantasy football player. And joining me as he does each and every week, he is the fantasy professor, a real professor. It's John Bush. John, welcome back.
Hey, Dennis, how are you, my good man? This is great. It's dry down here in Arkansas. We're still a little hot. A little bit of cool weather. For us, cool is anything below 60 is cool. But word about my friends. I've got students down in Florida. They're, practicing. Some of them are, working. So I hope everybody's making it out. It's just crazy. There was a thing on the storm surge, and they were predicting 9 foot to 15 foot in some areas. And they had a graphic and had a person standing in, and just you could imagine what 9 foot of water would look like versus 15. Dennis, it's like apocalyptic, the way they were describing. So I'm sending good karma and vibes, and I hope it all works out. But it's going to hit, I think, this evening. So it's a lot of tornadoes been spawned
Oh,
already. If you,
been
I know
awful.
you've been following it, me too.
Yeah, it's that's no gripe this week for me. I've been so busy trying to keep my sisters safe down in Florida. I've
Oh,
got,
that's right. I hope she got
you know,
out.
well, my sister who lives really close, and when I say really close, I'm talking about blocks away from the bay. Uh, she up and left on Monday.
Good.
She said, "Heck with this. We're going to, I'm coming to Illinois to visit some relatives." So she's in
Nice.
Northwest Illinois right now visiting
Nice.
her daughter and kids,
Nice.
and that was the smart move for her to make because
Yes.
she lives way too close,
Yeah.
within blocks. The storm surge, when you talk about 9 to 15 foot storm surge, that's right at the base, right at
Yeah.
the coast.
Right.
But as you go inland, you can go inland for quite a ways, and you could still have 5 foot worth of inundation of
Yeah.
water with a storm like this because it just shoves water, and you're talking real flat land. So it's dangerous. My other daughter, or my other sister, who's farther away from the bay, so storm surge won't get to her
Good.
unless it's an arc-like event, and this will not be. But she had an unusual circumstance because she trains rescue dogs, for folks
Ooh.
that are, emotional support dogs or other different types of training that they get after they leave her. She
Hmm.
takes care of the regular puppy training and getting them used to being around people and all that kind of stuff. So she has a dog right now that she is training, that she takes to the local hospital to visit with folks that are sick. So for her, if she bugged out to a shelter, she would have to first take this dog back to the shelter or to the rescue organization people, which was quite a drive. So she decided that with my forecast, of course, that the storm would not be a direct hit right there in the southern part of Tampa Bay. I said I think it would be closer to Longboat Key and Sarasota, which is far enough south that she will not. With this storm, Professor, it's been actually remarkable. A lot of times with these hurricanes, the eye wall is 20, 30 miles across.
Yep.
And the hurricane force winds can extend out 125 miles with some of
Right.
these storms.
Right.
This storm's eye is 3 miles across.
Well, that's
That's it.
tight.
That's it. And the hurricane force winds, last I saw from the hurricane hunters, were only about 35 miles out from the center. So
it's really going to be a tight fit and a impact.
correct. But the area that gets impacted, sadly,
Yeah.
just south of Tampa Bay, there's barrier islands all the way down to the Keys. And Longboat Key and some of those other keys just to the west of Sarasota, they will be first of all cut off from land because there will be bridges that will be totally inundated and washed away by the storm surge. That's how powerful this is going to be. And some of those communities might not exist on Friday morning. They might just literally be obliterated from the map. Years ago, many years ago, in the 1800s, there was a hurricane of this magnitude, or thought to be of this magnitude, based on the reports of wind at the time, that actually cut a new inland through the barrier islands along the South Carolina and North Carolina coasts. Literally cut a new channel. That's how strong these storms can be, and of course, obliterated the ones that were there. So this is a dangerous storm. It's a scary situation. I've been watching this around the clock for my sister and trying to keep her updated with factual information, unlike so much of the death and destruction is going to be, from north to south. All of Florida is going to be gone. No, this is going to be a very tight, compact area. If you lived along that coast, though, and you didn't get out, man, you are rolling the dice, because that storm is going to get somebody and it's going to hit them hard. Most likely, Longboat Key to Sarasota is where I think it's going to make landfall later tonight. And, hopefully everybody got out. The folks that couldn't get out, hopefully you're safe. Very, very dangerous situation. But Professor, this is just like fantasy football forecasting. It's trying to, when you make a weather forecast, 4 days ago, I said Longboat Key was where I expected it to be, just south of Tampa Bay. And I gave my alternate forecast farther south. That was what I was feeling. And I'm right now, it looks like I'm going to be 100% true. I'll probably be a little bit too far north with my forecast, but just like in fantasy football, what is the contingency forecast? If my forecast of Juju Smith-Schuster, for instance, I thought the world of him maybe taking over. We talked about that last week, where somebody's taken over for Rashee Rice. Rashee Rice is gone. Rashee Rice was producing a lot of fantasy football points. Those points now get distributed somewhere else. There were 3 places that they were going to go. They were either going to go to Juju Smith-Schuster, they were going to go to Justin Watson, or they were going to go to Noah Gray. Worthy was going to still get his. Kelsey was going to still get his. Maybe they also see a rise. But those were the 3 options. So in fantasy football, when you have a contingency forecast like that, I grabbed shares of Smith-Schuster, of Watson, and a Noah Gray, and just held them to see who was going to emerge. And in some cases, I grabbed both of them. Now I can throw Watson back. I'm pretty confident that what we saw of Juju Smith-Schuster on Monday night, uh, while we're at it, my condolences to your Saints.
Yeah.
Not only losing, but losing your quarterback. That is
Yep.
rough.
Yep.
That is rough. But we're looking at a situation where I think we're right about the Juju Smith-Schuster.
Yep.
I've looked around leagues, Professor, and I know they've got a bye
Yeah.
this week.
That
So
would
maybe
be just let you know I sent you, we talked during the game. I'd already stockpiled him
yeah.
in 12 uh, of the leagues the week before, and so roughly a fourth. And there's two or three or four leagues still out there. I'm going to go, but I'm not going to break the bank.
No,
Uh,
no.
yeah, just I just don't. I just don't know how it's going to play exactly, you know, uh, game to game. I think right now, I think he's could be steady as a 2-3 type, or he could be a spiky 2-3, like a Lockett, that you have a great game and then they kind of, Chiefs don't need all that because they're doing something else, i.e., running more or whatever. I don't know enough of the dynamics. The Chiefs have not had a steady uh, situation with all the moving
No.
pieces. Kelsey hadn't really got going till recently. Rice was early, then he's gone. And then, we Pacheco and he's gone. I mean, we haven't seen a block of, where, okay, this is kind of a pattern. And I don't know the pattern, and that they're not, certainly they're not the only team that's like that at all. I mean, that's the whole thing I think's made it so. In a bigger way, we're all dealing with various teams with all the injuries and the shuffling, like Houston and Nico Collins is going on IR. So
Oh,
you're figuring out all these things. But so for the Chiefs, I don't know what Juju's going to be. Is he going to be spiky? And that's going to be a little troublesome trying to, you find those daps and find easy games and where it makes sense, and other games maybe lay off or move him to a flex. So I'm not going to bid and break the bank out of $1,000. I think I've got
no.
up to 60 or $70 in the few leagues that I didn't already stash him for $1. Of course, I feel like a sap. If I'd known before, I would have grabbed everywhere. But I got 12 leagues, and I'm always greedy. And just like I got Hilaire, been stockpiling him for the last 2 or 3 weeks, and I've got him just about everywhere. You can't find him anymore because I've got him, or others have snatched him up, and I snatched him up for $1. And he may work out, it may not. Hunt may just get a second life and become something that's going to amaze us all. And good for him. I missed out on Hunt. I got a few shares, but not like I'd want on Hunt. So I guess coming back full circle, I wouldn't break the bank on Schuster, but I wouldn't ignore him either. I'd put enough bid that somebody's going to pay for him. You don't want him to go for $10 and you said, man, I could have bid 20 on, that kind of thing. Put enough to make somebody pay, but not enough to break your bank. I don't think he's a puka, I guess is another way to say it.
No, I don't think he's a puka. And I think you're going to get him cheaper this week because they are on bye. Another guy that I would, and I love grabbing guys that are on bye weeks, by the way,
Oh, yeah, me
because
too.
people do tend to not bid on them.
Right.
Whittington from the
Yep.
Rams is another guy.
He's in my train.
Yeah,
He's in my list. Again, trying to get him cheaper than next week when everybody wakes up.
yeah, and that's the game plan with all of this and I did the same thing with Bigsby. Bigsby was a guy that I squirreled away because I didn't have faith that ETN would be able to stay healthy. I don't have a faith in any player staying healthy in the NFL. If
Yeah.
you haven't noticed, it's a pretty violent sport.
And now that I'm thinking about it, I am stockpiling. I've got all the William shares in New Orleans, and
Yeah.
I'm starting to go to Miller in places
Yep.
where it makes sense.
Yep.
Just I feel like Kamara's been used a lot,
Yes.
and he's been the only piece that made sense for them. So they've been running him hard, and they've been trying so hard. And that initial couple games, and I think there was this enthusiasm. And I mean, look, it's just the Saints. It's called the Saints yearly playbook, Dennis. I'm used to that. We had our Super Bowl. We lost to the Kansas City Chiefs. Okay, we'll put our, the one of those swamp snapping turtles. We'll put our head back in and dig back in the mud. Now it doesn't mean, Dennis, if you reach down there and try to tease us, we won't snap your finger off. But for the most part, I think we're going to hibernate, for the winter here. But we could get prickly if you throw some Tabasco at our snapping turtle face. We gonna come out and try to bite. So we are not safe, but we're gonna go back down until Carr comes back. But the Chiefs spanked them good, and Carr was trapped, and he was just
Oh.
throwing for his life out there, and it didn't work on the Chiefs. And imagine that, right? Probably a three-peat Chiefs. Imagine the Chiefs. Andy Reid had the Saints number. It's not a shock.
So I saw a great comment by somebody, and I wish I had remembered who it was, but um, I'm not gonna steal it for my own line, but it's a perfect analysis, perfect explanation of both Kareem Hunt and Juju Smith-Schuster. They said Kareem Hunt is the Timu version of Isaiah Pacheco, and Juju Smith Schuster is the Sheen version of Rashee Rice. And you ever had anybody in your family that's ordered stuff from Timo and Sheen, you know what I'm talking about. It's just a cheap knockoff of the brand name. And what often happens with the cheap knockoff is it doesn't last very long. So don't bid a huge amount on either Hunt if he's still available in a few leagues, but not very many because people were pretty quick. I grabbed Hunt in a couple of leagues. I grabbed both Hunt and Clyde Edwards-Helaire because I wasn't sure who. And in some leagues, I had Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I had Kareem Hunt, and I had Carson Steele. I wasn't sure who was going to emerge. And so you hedge your bets, and then whoever emerges, you keep that guy and you move on from the rest and you find that next target. But every week, you have to be thinking, who is the next man up? Right now in Houston,
Yep.
if Joe Mixon doesn't come back,
Yeah.
the next man up is probably no longer Cam Akers. It's Dare Ogunabowale.
Yeah. I'm finding that he's still out there, and I'm gonna try to get him cheap, but I'm not gonna break the bank on him.
No,
But
no.
I'm gonna, if I can throw $1 or 10 out there out of 1,000, then I will.
And here's how this is going to play out, I think. Mixon will probably be back this week. Okay. That moves Cam Akers to the bench, but it doesn't move Dare Ogunabowale to the
Nope.
bench because he has been very effective as a pass blocking guy, something that Mixon, it's never been one of his strengths. So now you get into an obvious passing down. Joe Mixon's off the field for two reasons. Number one, you keep him healthy by playing him fewer snaps. So I wouldn't expect him to get more than 40 to 45% of the snaps going forward. Somebody else has to pick up a bunch of those snaps. It'll probably be Ogunabowale. You'll probably see Pierce getting a few when he's back. You'll see Akers getting a few when he's, as long as he's healthy. But Ogunabowale is not going to go away. This is a player, that has been around forever. And why has he been around forever? He doesn't make mistakes. And when you have a player who is going to protect your quarterback and do a good job staying in the block occasionally, that guy's going to be on the field. And guess what gets to happen when they don't blitz?
Yeah.
You get to go out for a pass and an easy reception at that. So I look at all of this. You got to look at every single team.
Yeah.
And you got to be thinking, who's the next man up?
And Dennis, I got one. I guess I'll let slip now. Thielen I think next week is his four week, so he can come back in 2. So why not grab him this week if it makes sense on your team for $1? I've been stopped. I had 2 or 3 shares of Thielen. I had a lot more in best ball, but this year, I'm actually doubled what I started with just already. I think I had 3 shares. I got rid of him. Now I'm getting him back, and I think I'm up to 6 now for $1 a piece, and I'm going to fish a few more out. Zay Jones out of Arizona is available. Ken Bourne is another $1 play. So I've been doing those 3 for $1. I'm not quite sure. I think Thielen's got a role, especially with Dalton. And by the way, we're not talking Puka, folks. Thielen is Thielen. No. But for $1 on a bye week, a good DAP week, it's worth $1, right? I mean, right now, injuries, it's just imagine DJ gets hurt. Then Thielen becomes more valuable in a couple of weeks. So that's just where I'm trying to look ahead to that. And if I played Superflex, I guess May, the quarterback is coming, and Connell from the Raiders. If I was in Superflex, I probably already had those squirreled. And it may be too late, and there's people get aggressive in Superflex, get crazy. So I don't know. Maybe Dennis knows so we know May. Is it Russell Wilson? Is he that next one that, that target that for $1 while everybody's still asleep or looking elsewhere?
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah, I would think so. You want to have a few of these backups ready to go. A couple of guys I have squirreled away because of potential injuries. I've got Tyrod Taylor in Superflex sitting on the bench. I got Drew Lock from the Giants sitting on my bench. Yeah. These are guys that,
for $1, real cheap. Why not? If you're playing Superflex.
And if you don't need them any particular week, but you need another starter, you just rotate somebody else in. Yep. Don't be afraid to turn your roster over in fantasy football. And yes, sometimes you'll get burned. I dropped Tyrone Tracy in a dynasty league where we got thin benches. I know.
Man,
I know.
That is so. What did you get? What was your thinking on that? How did you end up that way?
Because we needed a starting running back.
Is this in our dynasty?
This is in our dynasty league.
What?
So
hold it now. I'm about to sanction my man here, my offensive coordinator here. Come on,
thought I could float him and get him back. I put in a bid for him. Somebody bid over $250 to get him.
Oh my God!
Well,
he's not worth that.
I had bid in the 50s to get him back.
With Singletary still out there.
No, Singletary will be back. If Singletary had been gone for the season, there's no way I would have tried to.
Something.
Yeah, but I tried to float because we needed a starter with all the injuries that we had, with Kupp out and Devonta Smith out, and our running backs in a shambles. we needed to do something, and I picked up Justice Hill, who got us some
Hey,
points.
he's
So
viable on weeks, on occasion.
yes, and that's the strategy you have to use sometimes at running back is give me a live body. If
Yep,
Cam Akers emerged and could get you 7 or 8 points, sometimes that's the best you can do.
yep.
And you just go on. It's better than getting 2 or 3 points. And so you got to make these decisions. I thought Kimani Vidal was better to keep than Tracy because of Dobbins' injury history. And then, of course, Singletary goes down and Tracy's wide open. But those are don't be afraid to make a mistake. So many people are afraid to make a move because well, I can't, I can't get rid of that guy because what if he becomes something? Okay. In the meantime, you lost 3 games by throwing your same garbage out there when you had an opportunity to upgrade. So when you have the opportunity to upgrade, take it. Occasionally it'll burn you. Occasionally you get cute by floating a guy and he doesn't come back to you.
Right.
But it happens, but you don't worry about that. You grab the next guy. But my goodness, we're talking running backs on the wide receiver side of things. Xavier Hutchinson
Yep. He's
from the
being bandied
Texans.
about his
Oh
name.
yeah, yeah. You'll get a chance. Diggs and Dell will still be 1 and 2. But what if something happens to Dell again? What if Dell misses more time? Now all of a sudden Hutchinson's the second option on that team. So you always have to be thinking, who's the next man up? Who's the next man up? That's the way you have to play fantasy football. Nothing amuses me more, Professor, than when I see a league and everybody is asking, "Hey, how much do you think Bigsby's going to go?" And you're just laughing because you already have them squirreled away for nothing.
For
And
nothing.
and you're just sitting there with them waiting for something to happen. I had some redraft leagues where I had Tracy in that situation. So it's just plan ahead. Don't be afraid to turn that roster over and just worry about patching and filling the lineups through the bye weeks, 1 week at a time. But if you've got that empty roster spot, don't be afraid to grab the guy that's on bye because people will try to float them. In my home league a few years ago, it was the Philadelphia kicker was just lights out all season. Came to his bye week, somebody dropped him to pick up another kicker. Normal move, right?
Yep.
Oh, I had an empty roster spot. I grabbed him right away. And then I had the number 1 kicker the rest of the season. I did that with Tucker in some redraft leagues when he was setting the world on fire. You just always pay attention to that secondary waiver. And by that, I mean, after waivers run, look who gave up who. That's how I got Schuster last week in a few leagues because people gave up on Schuster and the week before Rice. And all of a sudden you're like, ooh, now Rice is out. I'm going to grab Schuster again. Nobody wanted Schuster because he put up a big donut hole for you. But that was a 0 with Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy both in the game. Now you're down 1. It's time to make the move. But don't be afraid to turn your roster over, patch and fill if you have to. And always, always, always look for that guy who just got discarded by somebody. You will often find a gem.
I agree. There's a lot out there. You've got to pay attention. That's why I use my snaps. Data, it's out. Science Fantasy Football is a method. And, to look. And again, it's not the end, Dennis. It's just a beginning, right? It's an initial cut. Let's just see who's being active. And I colorized orange highlighted players. I do a team by team thing. Check it out. And the orange is just things that I think are interesting. Doesn't mean I'm getting them or paying whatever for. it's a shorthand or a short way for me to kind of narrow my decisions a little bit, because I know people don't have as much time as you and I, and they're not nutty like your icon, that we just live and die by this stuff. But uh, folks, I'm spending lots of hours a week just looking and figuring stuff out. So hopefully that's the beginning. You can listen to people out there, and there's things that are the more is said. In other words, the more experts in quotes or say the same player, the more likely you can spend a lot more money. So, you know, just be aware of that as well. So I like to know who's being talked about versus who just maybe one or two are saying, just a few people. I think that's interesting. It's kind of like high odds horse or a more reasonable. I mean, everybody sees this. So the obvious is being said by everybody every week. And so that's going to attract a lot of attention. And if you want to do the dollar and the be slippery, you got to find those that are not being talked about a lot. And I think my snaps is one way to get into that thinking there a little bit. So I would urge you to do that and practice in your diary. Why did you add and drop players? Notice when I asked Dennis, how did we lose Tyrone Trey? He told me. Okay. And he outlined it. It wasn't like, well, I was just bored and, just thought I'd flip a coin, or, I was about 3 beers in and, a couple of shots. And I don't like all those old giants versus a logical approach. And Justice Hills, it's understandable. And, we still hadn't seen the end of all this. Like you say, Singletary wasn't coming back, it'd probably be more of an era than it was. So it happens. But there are folks out there now that you can get for nothing, Dennis. So
Oh
keep
yeah.
looking, keep searching.
Yeah, and that's the key is you got to just kind of know who's out there, know how to get them, and just kind of reel them in when it's your time. And
Yep.
just kind of keep an eye on always who's available in the leagues you play, and you will do better if you're kind of ready in advance for knowing how to react. But one of the things that I know Professor has been really curious this year after I got done doing some stat work.
Yeah.
I'm seeing guys emerge as the top fantasy player for this year,
Yep.
and they have something in common at certain positions like quarterback. Their team's real defense is awful. Right now, Mayfield and Burrow are the 1 and 2 best quarterbacks using my best index.
Yeah.
Both of those defenses are giving up a huge chunk of points. We have some more studying to do in the offseason to see how bad a defense has to be to create a great fantasy football quarterback. But one of the things that I'm really utilizing a lot when it comes to my tough choices in fantasy football, and it worked again this week, Professor.
It
It's
did.
your power rankings. I
Okay.
have found these to be very, very interesting week in and week out.
And uh, I like top down metrics. I don't see a lot of that out there. And to me, the reason I do this is I like to have a feel, right? A taste, right? You're on the buffet and I'm gonna take a little bit of that. And Thanksgiving, Dennis, you go through the line first time and you get a little of each thing and then you go back and get a lot of what you liked, right? That's the old trick. And like I said, if you got in-laws you don't like, there's, like I said, we've talked about tricks to get rid of them, to keep them from mooching in on your good spread every year. the ones that ruin, right? The Detroit, the turducken, the turkey leg football. I don't need bad vibes while I'm losing on my fantasy teams. That just pisses me off even more. So I'm not into crabby in-laws and me losing on Turkey Day. So anyway, uh, power rankings are you're nibbling a little bit at groups of teams, and I've got those that seem to be for this week only, right? So I do it weekly, Dennis. I don't do it seasonal. I use my efficiency metrics that I get a snapshot of what's happened before. This is just this week. And this is an interesting week, and it just hit me. The overall distribution of the week is a little strange. If you see the number of teams that seem to be in the red
Ooh,
is
bad.
higher than normal, and look at the break. The last team, the so-called poorer team, weaker team, Tennessee -7.5 below average, and then Arizona -2. That's a big gap, and I don't remember previous weeks, and I'm put this down to check, Dennis, but these kind of patterns that could be big landscape patterns is, what does this really mean? Is that like, man, these guys that are bad are really bad this week, and be extra cautious? I don't know quite, because I haven't done the metrics, because I don't have interns, because ESPN had to hire me, damn it. And I say this all the time. One day I'm gonna get that call. Dr. Bush, we're gonna put your brain to work, and we're gonna give you a fleet of AI and interns. We want you to create stuff. And here I'll go, Dennis. I'll have to leave you by the side of the road like an old bowl of bad gumbo, threw you to the side. You were good until I could step on you and move on. Got that old gator, just kind of drag him out for one last hunt, put him down. So anyway, I'll move on, Dennis. But anyway, this week, all joking aside, love Dennis. He's my man. But just that worried me, and I hadn't decided what it means yet, Dennis. And folks, by the way, I'm going to tell you, I don't know what it means. Unlike the experts on Twitter, they all know exactly what it means, and you should follow them 24/7 and listen to everything they say and do everything they say. I couldn't tell you that. I'm
I,
just
I
saying
actually
this is
I
what
have
I
an
say. Yeah,
I
go
have
ahead.
an opinion on what
Okay.
this means.
Okay. Go for it.
What my opinion would be is any of the teams that are in the red
Mm-hmm.
this week, I would look a second time to make sure of why you're playing a player from those teams.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean don't start J.K. Dobbins, for
Nope.
instance, from the Chargers, but it means I'm going to take a second look and see if I've got two other running backs or three other running backs that might be in a better situation. I look at your red flag teams
Yeah.
as a warning. This is not okay. I'm not playing Ramondre Stevenson this
No,
week, no
no,
matter
no,
what.
no.
But I'm going to look at that roster especially close because I've got a rookie quarterback who I've never seen before. How is the team going to react? How is the play calling going to be different? And then you got them as the worst of the worst
And
on
and maybe the quarterback is telling me something here.
and it
Look
could
at look at these
yeah.
teams. There's a lot
It,
of trickiness about the quarterbacks too.
and that could be why New England has earned a spot this low.
Yeah.
And
They were
maybe
low
Drake,
last week too. Yeah.
yes, and maybe Drake May all of a sudden gets us up into the white or into the
It'd
lighter
be
red.
nice.
Who who knows? But when I see this big of a gap, See, on the top end, it's a nice smooth curve, if you will. You go from 2.8 to 4.6 to 5.3, 5.3, 5.9, 6.5, 7.3 before you're into that solid green. It's kind of a smooth deal. So those teams like Detroit, San Francisco, Green Bay, Dallas, I don't worry about them. But the teams, when there's a 5 point drop, that is a startling number. And that should get your attention because this is really bad. Like I could make a case of saying all of those teams deserve to be, for instance, it's almost closer between Tennessee and, say, Jacksonville in the dead middle. You're closer to the bottom than the middle in some cases when you look at some of these teams. And I don't like that. I like to have teams that are showing a smooth change from one to the next. When there's a harsh change like that, and then all those teams in double digits below, that to me, those are the ones that I'm going, man, I need an excuse to play somebody on each and every one of those teams. And I'm only going to pick their best player. I'm not going to the secondary player. For New England, I am not playing the tight end. I am not playing one of their wide receivers. If I have to play Drake May in a super flex because I'm desperate, I might roll the dice. I'll play Ramondre Stevenson perhaps, but I'm not going any deeper than the best player on their team. And even then, I'm doing it only after I've looked at every other alternative and said, okay, I'm kind of stuck with this today.
Yeah, like I said, I just noticed that the distribution was a little funky for this week. I don't remember it being as jarring at the bottom. So I
No.
don't know what that means. It's a bye week. Don't know. Just I do make note of that. I
Yes.
think we're San Francisco versus Seattle this week, right? We're going,
Yes.
and they are, I would say, fairly close. I don't think there's a lot of distinction. I know that it says 5.9 and 2.8, but in the big picture, the way I don't want to start making these kind of cuts now. This just kind of they're grouped and they're kind of the same likewise. So I'm not worried or I'm not shying away. I'm not jumping. I'm just saying, okay, nothing big. For instance, Tampa Bay against my Saints. Oh, I'm worried. Saints way down here, Tampa Bay way up there. That is a distinction that makes me want to shift to Tampa Bay. Worry about Olave, worry about Shaheed. Doesn't mean I won't play them, but the choice for flex gets a little more intriguing if this week because of the changes and this is just a warning that maybe I should maybe Olave's down game wasn't a fluke, that kind of thing. I don't know yet. And folks, I don't make final decisions, Wednesdays, right? It's final decisions Sunday mornings or, tomorrow about 5:30, 6 o'clock, right? For the Thursday game. So, and I guess we got one of those damn London crappy
Oh,
tea
yeah.
and crumpets up your bum game. Come on, folks. Tired of all these stuff. Come on, crumpets up my ass. Okay. Uh, so let me look here. So uncertainty this week. The most uncertain teams are Tennessee, Jacksonville, Houston worries me. Lots of things with
Oh, yeah.
Diggs. It's funny how this catches that a little bit. It doesn't mean I'm not going to play, you know, Diggs because Collins not whatever. It's just telling you something. Philadelphia coming back. There's some injuries, and Brown and Devonta Smith coming back. There's just a little hint that there's, things to think about here. Uh, the low uncertainty teams is New Orleans, and you're saying, well, hold it, is that good or bad? Well, what that means is I don't think there's any guessing about New Orleans. It's not like, hmm, that kind of thing. So I think there's more, it can be steady like Detroit. I think we know what we got there versus I think we know what New Orleans is, and there's not a lot of uncertainty about it. I think that's just adds to the power rankings in a different way. And then finally, metrics here. Then this is my efficiency. I measure actual game points, yards gained over time, okay, per second actually. And I tweak and I come up with what I call a team efficiency. So we're scoring. So it does get a little bit of defensive in there because it's total points scored. And then I've got offensive with the yards and the per second concept. And for this week, Dennis, what I did is I have enough data that I got the league average for the whole season, and then I looked at the last 3 weeks, and I scaled the difference between the two. And so what you see on the chart is those that showed in recent have been doing much better than the whole season. So unsurprisingly, Minnesota is they're just out there by themselves.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
like on a whole different team. Washington, Cincinnati, Buffalo, Denver, that could be a surprise. Indianapolis could be look at what Flacco has done.
Oh.
I'm gonna be amazed if they go back. If they go back to Richardson, I think they'll get Flacco again because they'll. I don't know. If I was the coach, I'd have some hard times setting Flacco. He's hot right now. And the bottom, KC, Dennis, I'm just saying they're less efficient, but Pacheco's gone, Rice is gone, and they're still undefeated. What a team. This kid doesn't matter, coach. It doesn't matter probably as much defense as I would like it to. And again, folks, I just invented this. This may not be perfect, but at least this is something to consider. But Miami, bottom of, I mean, way down there. Dennis, New England, Houston worries me recently. I'm worried. Look at the Saints. They were so good early, Dennis. And now look.
Oh.
Yeah. So you can look at Chicago and they've kind of declined. So look at Dallas and they've declined recently. Those are, and Tampa Bay has declined a little bit. So it doesn't mean anything other than kind of gives you some trends. Maybe you're catching teams moving up or down the escalator, as it were. So this is another way to think about it. So we're for instance, I think we were talking San Francisco is pretty much, we know what they are. They're doing pretty good. And Seattle is a little bit more tricky.
Yep.
So there is some distinction saying be a little concerned. Somebody like Lockett, this may not be Lockett's spiky week. Okay, I worry a little. He may not get my fly. I had him last week, but maybe not this week. Love San Francisco, that kind of thing. And for efficiency, let's see, I don't know where San Francisco is, but they may be your Seattle, kind of below average, and
Yep. And San
San Francisco
Francisco's just above the
right
red.
there. So they're grouped together. So again, mano a mano, they're kind of the power rankings and the efficiency. It's saying in some ways it's close. It's just the player uncertainty kind of breaks for San Francisco. In other words, I think we know Kittle, right? We know Mason, we know Purdy. There's a lot more moving parts with Seattle. Doesn't mean they won't show up, but it's another way to get a taste for the matchup, Dennis. And that's what I think people use, I think, these player metrics and they forget the landscape. And that would be, if I was going to preach, use the scientific method, use consistency, think about things that let you look at the big picture, the landscape first, and then get down to the player. And I don't see a lot of that. Certainly, consistency is not a, everybody doesn't do that. Everybody's got favorite stats for players, and your opinion, and I know mine, we think they kind of get stuck on these, and that becomes this bottom up approach. And in biology, when you're looking at an ecosystem and understanding all the components of a system, you don't start at the bottom. You start at the top. I want to figure out my car, the whole car, and okay, what's it doing? And then go down to the next level. Okay, let me look at the engine here. How's that? And then, okay, what about the air intake? Okay, let me look. Notice you're coming down and then focus versus starting up. And Dennis, it's a lot easier. And I tell this to my students. I said, if I have a square ice cube and we watch it melt, okay, there's the puddle. You're like, yeah, square ice cube, there's the puddle. How about I pull out an ice cube, you don't know the shape, I let it melt, you don't get to see it. I walk in, so here's the puddle. What was the shape of the ice cube? And you're like, because that's a bottom up question. And you thought you understood bottom up until I just told you ice cubes can be round, right? They can be that half moon
Oh
shape.
yeah.
They can be spiky, look like a meteorite or something. So bottom up, top down have their usage, but a system requires both. And I think a lot of the experts miss the big picture, and that's where I like to start. And then I go opposite when I look at my teams and I'm going player up.
Yeah, go
Anyway,
to your efficiency data again, because I want
okay,
to point out something here on the
okay,
efficiency side of things.
okay,
So what we have here, folks, is a great chart for fantasy football, because in fantasy football, you want teams that score in a hurry. Okay. You want a lot of points. So you want a team that scores in a hurry. Kansas City is not scoring in a hurry.
they are not, but they
Philadelphia
don't
is
have
not
to, Dennis.
Philadelphia is not scoring in a hurry. Houston is not scoring. These are teams that are grinding out a game because their defense is, they can lean on their defense, or at least they think they can lean on their defense. So they're going to try to shorten the game by having these long drives. That's how Kansas City beat New Orleans. They beat New Orleans
Oh, they
by
did.
out slow playing them. They had 6-7 minute drives. That's awful for fantasy football. For fantasy football, you want a team that can play like their pants are on fire and can score in a hurry. That's Minnesota. That's Washington. That's Cincinnati. Even Buffalo's tendencies of wanting to score in a hurry got them beat last week because they had, 25 seconds at the end of the game with the ball at their own 10-yard line. And instead of getting out of their way of just let me score fast, they should have just ran the ball and ran out the clock and played overtime, because that was a better chance than giving the ball back to a team that, hello, Cincinnati, nobody scores much faster than Cincinnati this year. Only Minnesota and Washington have come in any higher.
Yep.
So their tendency of wanting to play fast, Buffalo's tendency to want to play fast, beat them. But in fantasy football, those are the teams you want. You want the guys that are going to try to score fast. You do not want the teams that are going to have 6-7 minute drives, because not only are they not going to score a lot of points, but you don't want to be playing against that team because they're shortening the game. They're going to score fewer fantasy football points by grinding out the clock. And this chart tells you exactly the teams to avoid. If I was loading up on players, yeah, I might have some Kansas City Chiefs in the game because they're going to win. They're going to score some points. But I would rather have more Washington players on the team. If I've got Kansas City and they're playing Vegas, or they're playing, New England, or they're playing, Houston and Kansas City together, or the Chargers and Kansas City together will be a shortened game and a low scoring game because you got both teams in that red zone that want to just take their time. And that's not what we want to see in fantasy football. It has nothing to do with quality of team, as we see with the Chiefs being 5-0, but it has everything to do with not scoring enough points. Mahomes isn't scoring enough points. The running backs and wide receivers aren't scoring enough points on a regular basis because they are shortening the game. And why? Because their defense is so good. They don't have to score a lot of points. And that's what we want to avoid in fantasy football.
Gotcha. Boy, we got a lot out of that.
Thanks, telling
Dennis,
you,
because I'm going to remember some of that. See, I invent things and I don't even know how to use it. So I guess I'll drag you along to ESPN. I guess.
I'm the pattern guy. You need the pattern guy.
I guess I'll let you hit your wagon to my star at ESPN. Come on.
There you go.
Okay. Okay. San Francisco, Seattle. Here we go. 28-21. 49, Dennis. This is a Husky game. Yeah. Spread is 3.5. So they're thinking Frisco should whomp Seattle, but everybody's going to play like everybody has to play. So I hate Thursday, and I'm always suspicious when I see this on a Thursday or a London game or a Germany game or a Brazil game. I mean, I know it can happen, but it just just doesn't work for me. I don't like it. Okay, so that's what says the DAP. San Francisco is playing away. Seattle is easy, and San Francisco play everybody. Mason, Debo, Ayuk, Kittle. Look at Kittle, easy. Purdy. They should just go lots of points all the time. Seattle, for the most part, Walker should be running. Geno should be active. Nothing's really stopping Seattle from making it a game. A little bit tougher against a wide receiver and tight end, but not fatal. I wouldn't play the Seattle D against San Francisco, but I might play San Francisco against Seattle. I guess if you're doing some type of props and whatnot, I would probably think San Francisco's D. You might get a pick six or something. I'd be surprised if it went the other way. Maybe, but anyway. Game wise, like I said, San Francisco's the favorite. They're away. They like to play at home, so their home away split is 35% better in efficiency at home versus away. So that does give Seattle a little bit of hope because Seattle at home is 11% more efficient than away. So San Francisco is playing Seattle's game that way. And both teams, but especially Seattle, have kind of declined in efficiency in the last 3 games. A little bit, probably 3 or 4 to 1 more. Seattle has been a little bit more down the last 3 games versus the entire season. Rushing, San Francisco rushes less, and they pass more by 8%. So they tend to rush less. So Mason may not get to rush as usual at home he would, but passing is a little bit higher. So maybe Ayuk and Debo and Kittle get a little bump this week. Nothing really too much on the last 3 weeks in rushing or passing. I will say Seattle, being a home, loves to rush. They hate to pass, Dennis. So once again, I'm a little worried about Lockett. I think I've already mentioned that once. with some of the other uncertainty and efficiency
Yep.
and power rankings and look at point 0.6, so 34% less passing at home.
Oof.
They love to rush. And I think the defense for Frisco's kind of making them want to do that. I will say, though, in the last 3 weeks, it says 3.5. They've improved on passing attempts. So they've done a little better recently. So I still think Frisco can win. I think Frisco will get to run and pass, but I think passing, we might see a little bit more fireworks, and that's good for Purdy and everybody else. I think Seattle will run a lot more than maybe people think. So Walker may be a good play for props or whatnot this time around versus the usual. And I don't know his usual, metrics there because I hadn't got to that far. And like I said, I do I have the team metrics where I go down to the uncertainty levels and the rankings, and I love San Francisco. I probably should put them since they're the favorite first here. Love Purdy, 83. That's a nice QB1 type. And Mason, love, not the best, but love. Kittle could be the best this week, 105, Dennis.
Woo.
Ayuk, I love over Debo, just a little. But they're both, I think, kind of 2-3 type, probably more 2 type this week. Jennings is a maybe 4 or 5 type. Play if you gotta. Okay. If one of them, were to get hurt between now and then he would move up. But that's kind of how I see the game. Seattle, I love Metcalf. Dennis, 50. That I'm probably not playing Lockett in my flex this week.
Nope.
I like JSN more. I think he's starting to, get in the pecking order as number 2 there in Seattle. Noah Fant, I guess if you're down and have nothing else, maybe he'll
Oof.
fall into the end zone. I'm just worried. Love Walker is a 1, 2, a low 1 this week. Gino, super flex, maybe a 2. Not big strong on their defense. I do like San Francisco a little bit more on the defense, but in the matchup, I like their defense a lot there. So that's what the metrics say, Dennis. What say you?
Well, I think that both teams are going to run pretty heavy in this game. Um, both defenses have actually been more on the weak side than I expected them to be. If you look at Seattle and their performances in the first 5 weeks, you throw out that Miami game where they didn't have a quarterback, and just about every other team that they've played has had one of their best offensive days against Seattle. And San Francisco has been giving up more points than you would think also. So I think both of these teams are going to be worried about their defenses. I think they're going to run a little bit more, but I think they're going to both have success running the ball. So I don't think it's going to be, necessarily cutting into the score. I think the 49 is an accurate over under. I think if anything, they might be slightly under. I like San Francisco in this game because Seattle, my goodness, they've been letting some what should be weak teams score a lot of points on them. Gave up a lot of points to the Giants, gave up a lot of points week 1 to Denver in a winning case, and then got thrashed, gave up 42 to Detroit. So I'm looking at this to be a relatively high scoring game, and I like San Francisco. I take the 3.5. That 49 is just a tough spread. I wouldn't bet that spread, but I do like San Francisco to cover that 3.5. And I look for this to be a good fantasy football game, especially for the running backs. I love Mason. I love Walker. I'd even play Charbonnet this week. If I was desperate, if I needed a guy, because I think there's going to be a split of cover of touches in the Seattle backfield. As far as the wide receivers go, we did see Ayuk come back from the dead last week, and that replaced Debo. That sent him to the dead. So hopefully you'll see both of those guys do better this week. I'm not crazy about either one of them. I am crazy about Kittle, and especially with this matchup and the fact that he's off the injury list as of today.
Oh,
They
sweet.
took the cue away from him. So,
Dennis, I got him in almost half my leagues.
oh, Kittle was
I'm so glad that he's off. Man, that helps a lot.
so preseason, Professor. Yes, we did like Kelsey. Yes, I liked McBride, but we were not that high. We don't have much in the way between the two of us. I don't think we've got any Laporta in redraft.
Nope.
And we have I don't think we have any Kincaid in redraft either.
Nope. No, I passed him.
Our
I got one Andrews out of 41
Andrews, I've got a couple of shares
and
of
somebody
Andrews.
dropped likely, and I've
Oh
got
my
such
goodness.
so I'm going to try to slip in there and get him cheap.
Yeah.
He's a spike, and if you can pick the right week, but no, it's not my savior by any means, but somebody dropped Justin Tucker, by the way. You were talking about kickers there.
Oh yeah.
And I like Elliott this week, folks, because they already had his bye and he's good.
Yeah.
So I'm actually making him a priority so I don't have to worry about streaming kickers so much this week. So just want to let you know, those are some things that I should have mentioned, but that's what I would do is, people might be, because everybody dropped him, Dennis, and they may not be awake right now. Because if you look at last week's points, if you just sort, you're going to miss Elliott. And so, some of your league mates may be asleep, and that's good. Keep them asleep. And by the way, if you do get Elliott and he, get you some wins, don't brag to them because that wakes them up. You put them back to sleep. Keep the chumps asleep.
Keep them asleep. That is
at the end of the season when you're counting your cash, then you wake them up and get them mad. Or during the draft, about 5 minutes before, you slap them on the back and say, "Remember the time I took Elliott from you? Ha ha ha!" And they're gonna be so mad and frothy that they'll make crazy mistakes. There's times to wake the chumps up, but it is not with your waiver wires. Tell them to go to sleep.
So that might explain why our draft night out team is number one right now.
Oh, I like that.
Because who was sitting next to us that didn't really like me? So I think it affected it might have affected the draft. But now getting back to the tight end situation, our two value tight ends that we loved this year were Kittle and Goddard.
Yep. I like both.
Been very pleased with going with that secondary tight end. Again, the secondary tight ends again this year ended up being some of the most valuable tight ends you could grab. You got them a little bit cheaper.
Yep.
And they've been outperforming. But Kittle, oh my goodness. When he's healthy,
man,
he's a beast. But when Kittle is healthy, it seems to hurt. It seems to hurt Debo a little bit. So that's kind of an interesting situation that I've seen. But that's how I see this Thursday night game. It is Thursday, so I always worry a little bit about scoring being down. Although this year we have seen scoring up on Thursday nights.
Yeah, my dog's pissed off. He just heard the game's Thursday, so he's howling. Doesn't like it.
He doesn't like.
He likes the Huskies, but he doesn't like that. He doesn't want it to turn into a squirrel.
No, does not like the Thursday games. It doesn't like those European
London games.
No.
Get your damn tea and crumpets. Come on, Dennis. They don't even know how to speak English. Come on.
No, doesn't like it at all. We'll head on over to the science of fantasy football. Check out all the data from the professor. Folks, trust me on this one. Best efficiency data that's out there and can give you some clues.
And power rankings, I think you like too.
Before somebody breaks out. And those power rankings are really, really good. I've got a couple of articles that'll be waiting for you over there at Science of Fantasy Football as well. And then head on back here on Saturday
Saturday. Yeah.
for another edition of the Science of Fantasy Football.
Get to work. Okay, welcome to After the Show. So I got a surprise that Dennis doesn't know about yet. So I'm going to
Love
stop this
surprises,
share.
by the way. Love surprises.
Yeah. So so let me pull this out, share this. So what I'm going to share, Dennis, is my rankings per week. And I always wonder with the DAPs, is there any way to look at the opposite side of the DAPs, the offense versus the D? And so I wondered if there's a way that we can make offensive DAPs, but in a different way. So I guess that was what I started thinking today, this morning. So how I'm going to try to do it is shown here. So this week I looked at every team and the wide receiver that I ranked for the team and got the average from 0 to 100. So Cincinnati is number one this week at 72 points and New England at 18. Probably no surprise there. So I'm going to actually take you through, Dennis, some ideas. And by the way, San Francisco, look at that versus Seattle.
Wow.
Yeah. So I thought then what I do when I go through, I started, and I do the DAPS a lot the same. It's 45.3. So what I'm going to do is subtract 45 point. And so you're actually getting to see me, Professor, doing his metrics. And I haven't done this yet. Okay. So now so Dennis, then what I'll do, and I got to move this. Let's see, where's my home here? I like to have it in the center. And now, once I got the scaled average, and that's how I like to do it. So the minus versus the plus. So there's a balance, plus 26, minus 26. So we can see the range this week. And now, Dennis, I think this is where the offensive DAPs, and I don't know exactly what it's all going to turn out because I hadn't tested it because I just thought about this, but I'm going to use the old box and whisker. Here it is for that scaled wide receiver versus average, and then I'm going to figure out the numbers. And so this says 7.8. So anything above 7.8 is right here. So I would just do this in green. So it'd be these teams here. So this week, these are your top wide receiver rooms. Notice we hadn't got to wide receiver 1 or 2. I'm just looking at everything. Maybe I do need to look at 1 separate and then 2 separate, or maybe like double the 1 ranking and half the 2, or Dennis, I'm just starting. This is just a new research project here. So the opposite side is minus 11.5. So that puts it right here. Yeah. So these are the worst wide receivers of the week. Okay. So now that we've got this, Dennis, I think, and then the average is about 0. So I think you could colorize this. And if you remember my DAPs, I use these same colors to look at above average, below average, tough, and easy. So it's the same concept. So now, how does the DAPS work? So both then San Francisco, let's just say it's all the green is +2, right? So +2, and I'm just making this up, Dennis, it's a +2. The above, let's call that, say, a +1. This would be a -1, these teams, and this would be a -2. So now we can go to the DAPS, Dennis, and I believe the DAPS for the wide receiver were above average. So they were like a 1. So overall, this would say, if you summed it, it would be a 3 situation, right? Strong wide receivers, a nice dap, you could call it a 3. San Francisco's a little bit tougher, so maybe a -1, a +1, it's a 0. So, and I went kind of quick, Dennis, but you see now we can get kind of a summation of the offensive DAPs by metrics, right? So I can score, and again, to remind the DAPs here, Dennis. So if we looked at the wide receivers here, so yeah, a -1, +1. So that'd be a 3. The interaction would be a positive +3. This would be a 0. So I've now graded the offense, wide receivers as a group, and now compared it to the DAP, and I've got a metric that I can test for all the different positions, Dennis, before I even get to the players. So now I could call this the game landscape. We've got the DAPs, and I could even graph the minuses and pluses, right? Like easy is a +2, right? Above average +1. Maybe extra easy is +2.5. I don't know. Never done this before. Thought about this morning. And now I could have a graph of all the positions and could look at this overall game metric, whatever landscape, and we could then see. So I've included how I'm seeing the wide receivers and how the DAPs are seeing together. And maybe there's some Vegas connotations here, that kind of thing, some props. Imagine putting this into our secret database that people don't know about. I'm going to stop there. Now you got the point. So I'll try to have maybe for the Huskies, or if I have time, I'll do it this week. If not, this is just something I'll chart if I get time. What do you think of that concept, Dennis? It's this next level for us to compare DAPs and, like I say, the offensive DAPs, but it's really not offense for the position. Maybe we call it OFPs versus defense against position, and we sum it together and get a metric.
I absolutely love it, because if you've got lousy wide receivers, you got just below average wide receivers,
Yes,
and they've got an easy DAP,
that doesn't help you as much. Yeah,
that's not as good as, having
strong wide
a
receivers
strong wide receiver
and an
against
easy DAP. Yeah,
or even a slightly below average DAP.
you're
You're
still getting
still
a positive. Yeah, it's say a
you're
+2 and a
still ahead.
-1, so it's still a
Yeah.
+1.
Yeah, I like that idea, and I think we don't look at that
No,
nearly enough. I
Dennis, I
don't
don't think anybody's ever done this before that I've
and I
seen.
don't and I don't think you need to break it into any formula between WR1, WR2,
But I mean,
WR3.
I could see that I mean, if I had interns, Dennis, I'd take years of data, come back through with this, and I could probably get you to the point, I could get that. Right now, I'm just playing loosey goosey, just again, as a beginning landscape view, just making me think even more. So when I look at this, it worries me even more about Lockett. Doesn't mean Lockett won't go off. It just makes me, if I see an opposite situation for my flex, I'm going to think hard, going away from Lockett. And I've got to make a Thursday decision. So it's really making me lean away from Lockett if I can find something that seems a little better. But
Yeah.
I'm trying to encapsulate, the DAPs versus the offensive position in a different way that's I don't think has been done. I understand they do what the cornerback wide receiver matchup. I know people have done that and try to grade it and whatnot. I'm trying to do something before you might get into that metric as a landscape. I still argue the top down starts the process and gives you a flavor, right? What does this taste like? And then if you got a hard, yeah, if I'm gambling, I probably want to know cornerback, wide receiver interactions. Yeah, I probably do want to understand that. If I'm betting lots of money, yeah. But for what we're doing, Dennis, right now, this time, it's a good research project. And if it gets to be really neat, i.e., Vegas stuff, then I'll just take it and keep it secret and people can go do their own work. And I've showed them probably too much, Dennis.
Well, here's a couple of things on what you said. First of all, the whole concept of a shutdown cornerback against a certain wide receiver, most often that logic dies on the vine because we saw it last week on the London game. We had Sauce Gardner supposed to be the shutdown corner.
Oh, Revis
And
Island. Wasn't it Revis? Didn't
yeah,
they
you had
call it
Revis
Revis
Island
Island?
before that. Yeah.
Sound like a punishment. We're sending you to
So,
Revis Island.
but what ends up happening, Professor, is coaches in the NFL are very smart.
Yeah.
So they will position their player and motion their player away from that tough defensive player. Now, that doesn't mean the defense won't counter by having that player follow him anywhere he goes on the field. We saw that with Spagnola in the Super Bowl, where he made sure to assign, he was like, okay, this cornerback is going to follow Debo everywhere he goes. If he goes into the locker room at halftime,
He gonna follow him.
he's going to follow him in there and he's going to be able to hand him the toilet paper because he's going to follow him anywhere that player goes. But that's the rarity. And what we saw last weekend,
Yeah.
we saw Gardner matched up on Justin Jefferson maybe 5 plays all game. Yeah. I mean, this is what happens. But when you look at the entire landscape from a top-down team point of view,
yeah,
you don't have to worry about the chess game going on between two individual players.
mm-hmm.
You're looking at 11 on 11.
Right.
And you're understanding what that means.
Right.
And sometimes, I'm telling you, Professor, sometimes that second cornerback on an opposing team is pretty darn good.
Yeah.
But if you look at the metrics of what they have done week by week,
right,
to come up with these grades,
yeah.
both on the offense and the defense.
Right.
Oh, this is another thing along with the power rankings that I'm going to love watching develop because I think there's a lot.
I'm running out of time, Dennis, but yeah, so it just hit me this morning, this concept here. So you it's worth pursuing, I guess. Is
Absolutely.
What, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No,
I would love
this
to
idea.
have a figure and just look at it. I think for our game to game, of course, you and I talk so much anyway. Can you imagine having another screen full of data to pontificate more? I'm hoping that it will boost our spread success in Vegas when we finally get all that going. We're in the process of doing lots of testing. And
that's the key, Professor.
I'm hoping that there's something like that at the end of all this.
We could throw something out there right now. We are doing pretty good, but it's not ready for prime time yet.
Oh no.
More research. What we learned in the first 5 weeks is that we have a lot more to learn in the next 5 weeks.
Yeah, that's
but
for sure.
The key is once we release something and say this is worth paying for advice, it's going to be something worth paying for advice. We're not going to throw anything out there before it's not ready for prime time.
I like it, man. The dog like that. What are you barking at? He's going crazy. Okay, I guess we'll have finish after the show. We don't want to spend because Saturday we go nuts anyway. Okay, Dennis, I'm going to stop recording here and put